The day had begun with promise. The sky had opened in endless blue, the kind of sky that gave people the illusion that their lives were just as open, just as wide with possibilities. Elena had stood in front of her mirror that morning, sliding into the shimmering silver dress she had chosen days ago. It was bold, maybe too bold for a countryside trip, but she had insisted on wearing it anyway. She wanted to look perfect for the dinner they were meant to attend later that evening, a charity gala hosted by one of her clients. For her, appearances mattered. They always had. In her world, presentation often preceded substance, and she wasn't about to risk looking anything less than flawless. Mark, on the other hand, had barely paid attention to what he was wearing. His plaid shirt and jeans were simple, comfortable, and practical. He dressed like a man who expected to get dirty at some point, no matter the occasion. That was his way, always prepared for things to go wrong. When they set out from their apartment, he had already packed jumper cables, tools, and a first aid kit in the trunk. Elena had teased him for being paranoid. "You always expect disaster," she had laughed, rolling her eyes as she adjusted her earrings in the passenger seat mirror. "And you always expect perfection," he countered calmly, his eyes on the road. "Maybe that's why we balance each other." It was a line that made her smile back then. But as the afternoon wore on and the car sputtered its way down a desolate stretch of road, his paranoia didn't seem so far-fetched anymore. The engine gave its first warning signs with a faint rattle, then smoke, then the sickly smell of something burning. By the time Mark pulled over to the side of the road, Elena's laughter had completely vanished. Now, as he leaned over the hood with grease on his hands, and she stood beside him with her phone pressed tightly in her palm, the balance between them seemed stretched thin. Mark was kneeling slightly, his face inches from the engine, listening, smelling, analyzing, doing what he had always done since boyhood when something mechanical faltered. He grew up the son of a mechanic in a town too small for its name to matter. His father had taught him patience with engines, how every sound told a story, how every failure held clues. Mark still remembered being 10 years old, crouched beside his father as they fixed a rusty pickup truck for a neighbor. His father's words rang in his mind even now: "A machine doesn't quit for no reason, son. You listen long enough, it'll tell you what it needs." But the machine in front of him wasn't telling him much except that it was overheated and possibly on its last legs. Elena shifted uncomfortably, the dirt sticking to her heels as she scrolled her phone again. The "no service" sign taunted her from the screen. She sighed heavily, as though her frustration could pressure the towers into giving her signal. "We're going to miss it," she said, her voice sharp with irritation. Mark didn't look up. "The gala, yes, the gala. I told you this was important. Clients don't wait around, Mark. This is the kind of thing that keeps me in business." Finally, he raised his head, his face damp with sweat, his eyes tired. "And you think I don't know that? You think I wanted the car to die right here, in the middle of nowhere?" Her lips tightened. "I'm just saying, maybe if we had left earlier, or if you had the car properly serviced last week when I suggested." "Elena," his tone cut through her words, firm, steady, with that edge of warning he rarely used but always carried weight when he did. "Enough." The silence that followed was heavier than before. Elena looked away, toward the vast fields stretching out endlessly, dotted with patches of gold, where the crops swayed gently. In the distance, the tractor sat idle, as though mocking her in its simplicity. Machines like that lasted decades, passed down through families, reliable as the land itself. But her sleek black car, the one she had insisted they take instead of Mark's old, rugged truck, had failed them in less than 3 years. It wasn't just the car. Somewhere deep inside, Elena knew the moment mirrored something greater. Their relationship had been sputtering too, breaking down in small, almost invisible ways. She came from a different world than Mark, a world of polished dinners, client meetings, events where appearance mattered more than authenticity. He was solid, dependable, but also rough around the edges, uninterested in the glitter that shaped her life. And lately, it felt like they were two mismatched gears grinding against each other, bound to strip down unless someone figured out how to make them work together. Mark slammed the hood shut with a sigh, stepping back to wipe his hands on his jeans. He leaned against the car, his eyes fixed on the horizon. His breath came heavy, not just from the heat but from the invisible weight pressing on him. Elena crossed her arms, clutching the phone against her body as if it were a lifeline. For the first time, she noticed the way his shoulders slumped, the tiredness in his expression. He wasn't angry, not exactly. He was worn out, worn from carrying not just the burden of fixing things, but of holding everything together, her world and his, their relationship, the constant effort to bridge the differences between them. She remembered when they first met. She had been drawn to him precisely because he was different. He wasn't flashy like the men she usually dated. He didn't care about appearances or networking. He cared about small things, like fixing her leaky faucet when he first visited her apartment, or carrying her heavy groceries without being asked. There was a steadiness in him that made her feel safe. She had fallen for that steadiness, for the way his hands looked when they were covered in grease, for the way his voice softened when he told her about his dreams of someday owning a workshop of his own. But somewhere along the way, the steadiness started to feel like stubbornness, and her world of ambition began to feel like a burden he resented. Mark broke the silence. "We'll wait. Someone will pass by." Elena lowered her eyes. "And if they don't, then we walk, but not in those shoes." His gaze flicked down to her heels, and despite herself, Elena let out a short laugh. The sound surprised both of them. It was small, but it cracked the tension, reminding them of better times when humor had bridged their differences. Mark smiled faintly, though it didn't fully reach his eyes. Still, Elena stepped closer, standing beside him instead of apart. For once, she put her phone away, sliding it into her purse. The gesture was small, but Mark noticed. They stood shoulder to shoulder in the fading light, the fields bathed in orange and gold. For a while, they didn't speak. They didn't need to. The silence wasn't sharp anymore, it was soft, like a blanket settling over them. Eventually, the distant hum of an engine reached their ears. They both turned to see a dusty old pickup truck rattling down the road toward them. Relief swept across Mark's face, though he tried to hide it. He raised a hand, and the truck slowed to a stop, its tires crunching against the dirt. An older farmer leaned out of the window, his weathered face calm and kind. "Car trouble?" "Yeah," Mark replied, running a hand through his hair. "Overheated. Might be worse." The farmer nodded knowingly. "Happens. Pop the hood, let's take a look." As Mark walked forward with the man, Elena stayed back, watching. She saw him then. The way he moved with quiet confidence, the way he explained things clearly, the way he never let frustration keep him from trying. He was a man who didn't quit, even when things got messy. And maybe that was what she needed to remember. Because relationships weren't polished galas. They weren't about perfect appearances. They were about breakdowns, and smoke, and dirt under your fingernails. They were about standing beside someone even when the road took you somewhere you didn't plan to go. And as the sun slipped below the horizon, painting the world in deep shades of crimson and violet, Elena knew that this wasn't just about the car. This was about them, about whether she could learn to stand still in the mess, to let go of perfection long enough to appreciate the man who refused to give up. The fields whispered in the evening breeze, the tractor stood silent in the distance, and for the first time that day, Elena felt a strange sense of calm. The road ahead might not be smooth. It might break down again and again. But maybe, just maybe, that was the point.